I'm going to take the time to introduce each of our presenters today here. Cities that take care. We were talking about public services. So we have here with us today Alejandra Diver from UN Women. She is a coordinator of entrepreneurial projects, economic empowering projects in UN Women. He has experience in the management of women empowerment, resilience, humanitarian action, and she has a master's degree in international development and humanitarian emergencies. Welcome. Master's degree, Mrs. Castillo. She's Secretary of Women in the state of Yucatan. Eduardo Rivera from Fundación Hogares, manager in community development in Mexico City for more than 10 years. He has worked in the implementation of programs of citizens' participation in the urban and social networks. He is ethnology by the Museum of Anthropology and History, and he works in space in homes in our country. And Unicio Rondon from our agenda. And she's a coordinator in our country. She's also a PhD in public policies, expert in migration and violence prevention. She has had different charges in public administration. She has worked in different organizations, in international organisms. She has worked in publications and field projects related to her expertise area. So we're going to have a very interesting time right now. We are coming out of a pandemic period after 2 years where it seems like we turned on the chip of we need to take care of ourselves, and not only of ourselves but among ourselves and our cities as well. We are going to talk first with Alejandra Diver from UN Women. So how does the public services intervene for the taking care, for the services that take care? Yes, thank you. If you can help me with the presentation, please. Thank you. Well, indeed, I'm going to tell you about the services that we are boosting for taking care, especially for care services that can become the engine of this socioeconomic recovery after this pandemic. But before anything, what are the cares? I mean, when we're talking about taking care, we refer to these activities that are very important that support life. So they support life, they regenerate the physical and emotional well-being of people, and they also back the reproduction of the societies and of the economy. In more simple words, is that taking care of people, children, elderly people who are sick, people who are disabled, not only in the physical way, but also in the emotional arena, to support their formation and also whatever has to do with the domestic work and maintenance of these spaces. But what is the problem here? That the workload that is related to these works, the work of cares falls into women mainly. Women are the ones who do this taking care, and on top of that, they do it they don't get any payment from that. So women dedicate 50.2 hours to this domestic work without any payment, and men do it 19.4 hours. So this impacts in the probabilities and possibilities of women to continue studying and to insert themselves in the work market. The participation rate in Mexico for women in the economy is 45% and is one of the lowest in Latin America, compared to the 76% of men. This is affecting in a very important way human rights for women, and it is producing gender inequality. I want to mention also that this is a crisis that precisely after the pandemic was seen. So we saw that with the pandemic, we saw a crisis of cares, crisis of the media of life, and precarity that comes together with a climate crisis that is still increasing this care load. And however, these have a great importance to economy, as I mentioned already. The economic value of the care and economic activities is 6.4 trillion pesos in Mexico, which is 27.6% of the GDP, and women put in 2.7 times more than men did. So what this tells us is that we have to move towards cities that take care. So this means cities that have comprehensive systems that take care, that promote the redistribution of the cares, the recognizing them, and the co-responsibility. Co-responsibility mainly of the state to guarantee the services, this type of caring services and systems, along also with the market, with the communities, with the homes, and within the homes between men and women. Now, I want to stop here for a little while. These comprehensive caring systems, we mean 5 main components where the services play a very important role, like daycares, like stays for the full day, like day houses for elderly people, among other things. This includes as well all the components that have to do with the regulation of the services to ensure that they are accessible, that they have a fair price, and they are, of course, of quality. This includes the formation, the training of the people who take care, the management of the information, of the knowledge, and the communication to promote this change. I'm going to talk to you about the work that we're doing from Women UN locally, and focusing on a case in Mexico City and in the municipality of Iztapalapa. And this shows how we boosted these different components in a strategy that we call 360. This includes the accompanying the different powers, legislative and executive power, to create the systems, to create this regulatory framework, to boost legislative processes that ensure the right to the care, because they're not only activities that we do in an individual way, but again, there is an important movement to move towards this right to the care. And specifically speaking, in Mexico City and in Ixtapalapa, we have implemented a research agenda for the decision making. This means we have done different diagnoses, geo-referential mapping to identify where do we have the offer, where do we have the demand of these care services, what are the indicators that we have to consider, like the distance to these services, the accessibility that they have, and we have also done some diagnosis on infrastructure of the needs of care, among others, that are very useful to identify where do we have to put our efforts in. We designed with the Training Institute for Work a curriculum for the professionalization of these care services, because as I mentioned, it's not just about the population that receives them, but to make sure that the ones doing this job do it that they become decent employment options for them. The territorial lending, this means pilot programs that we have implemented, and again, talking about Iztapalapa, where we did, based on a diagnosis on these gaps, a care service for children between 4 and 8 years old, past school, where they had a space for them to do their homework or play, and in which the first phase of this pilot program marked that 94% of the women that take care of those children, which were mainly mothers and grandmothers, use that time to work and get money. So 44%. So this talks about a great need and a great demand for this kind of services. And on the other hand, on children that use the service, there were a better school performance, and they also reported to feel in a general way happier. And of course, considering the context of the pandemic, where there had been an important period of not socializing because of the lockdown. And finally, I want to tell you about the methodology that we have on costs and return on investment in this type of services for these communities. First of all, children from 0 to 4 years, then 5 to 14 years old, and finally, elderly people in dependency situations. This methodology not only estimates the investment in terms of the percentage of the GDP, but it also estimates the number of employments that are being created directly and indirectly, and the tax income generated by this. So this list of actions that we have done are only an example, but they are all based on methodologies that can be replicable in other countries, but also have been done in other states. And I put at your disposal my contact information in case you want to learn more about them. And these were some examples that I'm not going to mention because of the time, but we have here the service for care of child in population. So this is how much they would cost. We have progressive scenarios and we can play out with them. If you say I want to invest not 0.29 of my GDP, but 0.30, we can adjust these numbers. But this is just an example of what this simulator can do. And just to finish, just to mention, investing in care services for economic recovery is key. It generates well-being for people, it generates employment, and it increases the participation of women. It brings along income for the state. So let me mention these two things. The probabilities for women to access a paid job when they have a daycare for their children, it goes up 22%. So the increase of the GDP, it's about 6%. So we know that these services, these care services, are the engine for our economic recovery.
Alejandra, thank you. Secretary, when we talk about public services, we usually think of governments, state, municipal, federal. Where are public policies headed in this sense? Well, thank you very much. Precisely talking about Alejandra's predecessor from UN Women, we talked about costs, so that women will continue to feel safe. She said it's not costs, it's an investment. I preside the Secretary of Women, part of public policy we are implemented in favor of women in Yucatan. The governor has instructed me to work throughout our territory, working with municipalities, with the town halls, which we know are the closest authority to the population, and we have been working significantly on the territoriality issues. So what are we doing in Yucatan to take care of our women? First of all, we are the state with the best perception of safety by women. According to INEGI, 64.6% of women in Yucatan felt safe. More than half felt safe at home, 54.6%. However, 69.7% of males feel safe at home. Even though we are in the first place, we have a challenge. There is still a great percentage that we have to bring back to safety in the various levels of government on safety and security. What are we working with? Well, one of our strategies is walk safely, move freely. We are training the whole system of transportation in Yucatan with a plan to detect harassment on the streets, what it is, how to identify it, the kind of challenges it presents, what are myths, what are truths, how to act, who to resort to, and that the whole public transportation of Yucatan is a safe space for women. Then we start working with this strategy. We trained the new public transportation path event with the participation of 46 people, 6 concessionaires. We are launching a training course with INDUT, the Institute for Urban Mobility, training more than 1,450 operators from 50 concession companies. It'll be a requirement. Any public transportation with a concession from the state must know what to do, have protocols established for sexual harassment, know what to do in case of detecting any kind of situation, including gender perspective among all operators. As part of our work, together with the Public Safety Secretariat, we are training 106 police units in our municipality so that they know how to act with gender violence issues and with a greater coordination, so that they can have a gender perspective of our police officers, training more than 4,000 elements throughout the state, particularly looking at protocols. And it is important to mention that here in Yucatan, last November 25th, Mauricio Villa, our governor, went from 20-something municipal women's institutes to 106. So every town hall now has municipal representation of this organization working together so that all town halls can coordinate with their safety and public safety institutions. We launched the Violet Brigades. We know that building awareness concerning women's rights have to do, concentration of rights, that there are many locations in which they don't have digital media, and we have launched training courses in the field with these sheriff's offices, faraway communities, rural communities, conducting training in all 106 municipalities, reaching 49,000 people, heading the distribution of printed information, campaigns led by the governor for the rights of women, knowing that the female population is among the most vulnerable portions of our society, reaching agreements with the General Attorney's Office, with groups of women, promoting the rights of women in the farthest communities of our state. Street harassment. We have been working with municipalities to create a judicial agenda in all town halls. We have reached 94 signed agreements so that all municipals make it mandatory to legislate sexual harassment on the street, service attention protocols led by the municipal police as a law in all of municipal regulations and codes. The Violet Brigades are present now in 30 municipalities. These are small units with the presence of the Secretariat of Women. We have female lawyers, social workers, we have psychologist services, and we coordinate them throughout the territories with all town halls. This year we'll add 2 more in the Junumay and Yaxcaba municipalities, extending the territory coverage. And mostly that women know where to go, who to resort to without having to travel to the capital city of Merida, but they can do it in their own territories, in their own land. And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Secretary. Lots of work to do with women, of course, from the perspective of the government and non-governmental organizations as well. Talking about housing, Eduardo Rivera from Fundación Hogares, the Household Foundation. How do these new paradigms concerning construction interact with the citizen? How we can make that into caring, taking care of people, when all of the preconceived ideas that we hold in our brain, in our mind, of how things should be, it all comes together into your presentation. You have the floor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be a member of this panel, of this group of speakers. To start with, I would like to say who we are. We are a foundation called Fundación Hogares, Household Foundation. We are a private assistance institution, no government, no religion, no political party. We detonate citizen participation activities to recover public spaces and generate a process of community empowerment. To date, we have acted on more than 465 venues nationwide using different urban art spaces, reforestation, and endless long-standing programs. Our foundation has a vision that is very clear on how to act in order to understand our human habitat. And I call it human habitat because we always think of three large strategic axes that are very important for us. Of course, you see a rather strange image. It is taken from mathematics. It's a Romeo knot. What is important are the circles. This knot, well, what it means is that you untie one of the knots, the other two are equally untied. That is, this is a knot that leads to perfect balance between all three rings. This is how we understand cities. We cannot, on the one hand, talk about citizenship if we don't talk about public space. And we cannot talk about public space if we don't talk about city. We cannot talk about city if we don't talk about citizenship. So these are the three rings that we have to interconnect in order to create a human habitat. If one of them is gone, no public space, no human habitat. No citizenship, no human habitat. No city in that perfect balance, no human habitat. Thus the importance of showing you this Romeo knot. And I'd like to show you an example that represented a great many challenges on how to interact with all these three concepts from the moment we act as a contingency. On September 19, 2017, as you all know, we suffered these major earthquakes. One of them was epicentered in Azochiapan state of Morelos. We started acting in a municipality called Jojutla, which was severely affected, more than 3,000 houses lost, a series of drama that occurs, of course, in these guise of disaster. We've fallen houses that could not be lived on anymore, plus all the altruistic work of a community that was trying to strengthen itself. Why is it important? Because the emergency, on the one hand, is of course very relevant, but what we were trying to implement is a strategy to recover public spaces in an emergency that demanded housing. When we came here, on November 17, we came there with a strategy saying, I'm looking for investment to recover your public spaces, not housing. So, of course, we were the recipients of lots of booing, and people demanded, talk about housing, but we kept that initial idea of a citizenship public space. Why? We put together a plan that was the physical and social Jojutla recovery, which had these 5 axes, 3 out of which I talk, citizenship, public spaces, and city, but we were looking for a long-term program, a large scope that would revitalize the city, building and rebuilding with emblematic public spaces that would provide the opportunity to really reconstruct. And that's how we started moving on through this strategic axis. Through Infonavit, our housing institute, we got a donation of 200 million pesos that allowed us to implement a large part of this program, and we got 24 million more from different financing sources among the private sector. I'd like to show you the participation of the citizens, only to determine what we were going to do. It lasted all of 2018. We worked with communities. I showed you on the screen that neighbors could work in the morning. They came in the morning. If they could come in the night, we met at night. What was important was to detonate this first participation exercise where people would make decisions on how we should rebuild Jojutla. Once we started identifying the historically emblematic spaces and opportunities on the territory, we developed Plan Jojutla. It was 10 public spaces on which we could act, church, small churches, small parks, community centers, and many others. And I'd like to show you a few images of how this reconstruction took place. This is the little church of the Santa Cruz. We were trying not only to recover the public space here, but to make the surroundings dignified, not the backyard of Tequesquitengo, but to revitalize the city, and people would feel empathy, identified with its own public spaces. There's another school, primary elementary school, in a place called El Ligueron. This is a school that is truly beautiful inside. It looks like a museum. Look at boys and girls attending classes. That is one of the classrooms in this Ligueron school. What we have been driving to is that there are people who will come to Jojutla to see these works, a more architectural vision, right? These are arches trying to make an emblematic recovery of the haciendas in the state of Morelos, but are at the same time a walkway. People can rest there. A balance between architecture, environment, and looking how to make the surroundings more beautiful. So when we started with this in 2019, and the people started to understand why it had been so important to focus on public spaces after a year of arguing, getting material plans, what the works would look like. When we started executing the project, it was nice to see how people who had opposed the works were coming. Neighbors would come and say, yes, we do want this. I took part of the participation. I raised my hand that I wanted this space to be like this. And that participation process in that first stage is what we called making citizenship. The other images, you can visit our website and see many more photographs like this, and how those 10 spaces ended up looking, what they look like today. So what we want to say is that these visions of how to build a city has to do with participation exercises in democracy, but it also has to do with giving access to everybody to dignified spaces. Other images of how the whole participation process evolved, because we started looking for a group of neighbor ladies who were interested in learning, making artisan shoes, bakery, purses, artisanal bakeries, and we made a community of women who in 2 more weeks are going to sign their articles of incorporation as a cooperative entity. Women who took on the responsibility for rebuilding Jojutla, activating their economy, moving forward after the earthquake. So in 2 weeks I'm going to sign, and this means that we are going to have worked for 5 years in Jojutla by now. And I move on to the second part of my talk. What have we learned as a foundation? Some lessons we learned. One, always start from the human side. Permanent discourse of centering on women, on men, on people. It's a muscle that we need to vitalize. It's not just about telling our neighbors, you want your garbage on the left or on the right? You want to paint it black or green or blue or pink? No, you got to look for methodology that at the center, at the heart of it all, are people. Second, understanding local narratives. There is no way you can intervene on a space successfully if you don't understand the culture, the pace of the community, the society itself. It is essential for us to understand the harmonious cultural life that happens in those places where we intervene, so that together we build a new narrative. 3, And this is very important, not addressing the most obvious as if it were evident. When we came to Cojutla, the first need was housing, but each of us have to check our technical competences and see and know what you can add to, what you can contribute, because the public space belongs to everybody. We are investing on the community. We were not investing individually on people's houses. So that was important for us to appreciate that whatever we do has to have this common value for everybody. It's not enchiladas, as we say in Spanish, is not something easy to do at all. We work with all stakeholders. Participative processes have to last for 2 weeks, move forward quickly and tell me what you want. It's not like that. When you detonate participating processes that to us took at least a year of work. And something that is also very key, when you argue with neighbors, men and women, earned rights are not consulted on. This is key. When we started talking with the man and women, somebody will say, I don't like this ramp for the disabled. That is something that we're not going to argue. That is an earned right of people with a disability. I don't like that my neighbor sexual preference. Well, that is not something to argue. Those are earned rights that cannot be consulted on. That is important to remember. When you detonate these participation processes, you got to keep them always as a reference, a framework. 6, we are our own enemies. The citizenry usually complains about the government, but it is us many times who are our worst enemies. But moving quickly, intervention is not the end, it's the means. This is a photograph of intervention in 2016 and 2021. 5 years later, the mural is still there, the tree has grown. It's not about making a great work of investment, it's the means to transform a community. Quickly again, let me show you these drawings. I think we're talking about moving policies toward proposals. There is another way to do things with a single thing in mind, creating an illusion that the society is different. And now there is the not, building the human habitat. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. And I keep this idea in mind, this last question that you were asking. What have we learned after going through a pandemic, through earthquakes here in Yucatan? We've had also hurricanes recently. Yeah, we actually did. And Unice Rendon, the question for you would be, is there a lesson that we've learned in which the citizens would start self-managing to actually being able to take care amongst ourselves? Thank you so much. And I believe the answer of what we do is precisely in the community. And before starting out with some of the slides that I have, I would like to make a reflection on why Fundación Oral, or well, my foundation is in this Smart City Forum. And I believe what's most important is to say that there cannot be cities are considered smart if they're not inclusive and if they're not considering as well in this development idea their neighborhoods, their regions, populations, and more complex context. And I believe this is why we are both here. And the construction of peace in these cities that take care, I believe it has to be a process that has different axes, that comes from down up and from up down as well, in which communities have to be seen more than just the object of public policies, but as the main actor within this public politics. And as my friend here said, that's not easy to do. It's not easy peace. But it sounds beautiful, but it's hard to do it because we have to put in some peace processes according to the problems that we are facing. We work in high-risk populations, with populations that have been in situations of violence, with youngsters that have had problems with the law, with women that have suffered violence. So there's a lot of process that we have to rebuild. We also transform the public space, but with a communitary and gender perspective, and this has a lot of meaning. So that means that public space has to go further beyond just streets and buildings and spaces to a common project for people, and that it really matches and harmonizes with the community. And our model has a word that we use a lot that is ERI. That's E for empathy, we have to know and we have to be able to put in wear the other people's shoes so that we can build something together from there and that can be useful for us. R is for resilience, and many of these neighborhoods that we visit is we try and see how do we transform a problem into an opportunity, and you're going to see a lot of examples. And E is for inclusion. I is for inclusion. So we have to get rid of stigmas because we have to include everyone. Part of our work is, first of all, to get to the regions, to the neighborhoods for the most difficult ones, the woman that is very mad, the one that is fed up of the government telling them, promising them things, the child that is in a gang or that have problems of this type, because our theory in this inclusion theory is that they don't do it because they want, but because they have needs, and this is what we have to work with. So from this inclusive vision, we are building these peace processes through communitary coalitions, networks of women that are building peace. We've worked with this in Oaxaca, in Ciudad Juárez, in Tepito, and we've worked with this also in lost cities, in Mexico City, in Ixtapalapa, in the state of Mexico, in different places. But in the end, it's about working in this preventing gender violence, crime, addictions through a comprehensive focus that promotes resilience and peace building through the transformation of public spaces. Through this comprehensive perspective, something very important is the young people. In Mexico, we have 38 million young people, out of which 22% don't study or work, and 71% have at least one risk factor in their community or in their homes, out of which the first death cause in our country from 19 to 29 years old, it's homicide. And that's why we have to know how to include these people, and we have to give them opportunities, because sometimes what we're lacking is these opportunities. We are working with young people and adults as well who come out of prison, because we have to give them a second chance where there's not even there hasn't been really a first chance in the first place. And this is what we have to do with this inclusion project, to generate protection factors and to generate this communitary protection, because sustainability, nobody can come and change your space and then leave, because as we were saying this in 2 lives or in 2 years, and this is going to fall down. So we have to make long reach projects, and this is not easy. This is about really giving identity and belonging to people, for them to have them as their own projects and not from external actors. So that is why each project has to be tailor-made, and it's also about bringing this in an intersectional way, and to bring this close to the community. It's about also using their life stories and their problems for those who have had it hardest, those who have committed crimes, for them to use their past and their stories to make better policies that are more real or more approachable. We in Tepito, I think we have Mayra Valenzuela here, is one of our allies there. We've done things from the identity of this community. We made the Safari Tepito, and what we did was, contrary of what we always do, we said, contrary from what everybody says, we said it only applies if you have been in jail. So we hired them to drive our tours. We made some theater plays. We took them to our houses 15 days, and we made a prevention project. We had the Tepitur as well. If you want to visit there's a tourist tour in the neighborhood, but with the people from the neighborhood to know the historical places. And from that identity, we brought in famous designers, and we made some clothes, Las Cabronas de Tepito, and it's called, if it's not from Tepito, it's not original, and it was in the Tepito Fashion Week in New York, and it's all about going back to the people. So these are some of the projects that we have for this comprehensive empowering that we have to have in these networks, that we have to have in this prevention, inclusion projects. Also, the economic empowering is very important, but it's not just any project. We have to use what we have. We have done fruit machines to remove the water from them, because we have a lot of fruit falling off the trees. So how can we use this to do something? So also with the women that do mezcal in Oaxaca, so we can add some added value to this, and to improve also the physical surrounding, that we have a before and after. This is the idea, to have other sectors too. We also brought the private sector. Comex is a great ally, but we also have some others. In the case of Ciudad Juárez, we even brought the first division team for the football team to go to a school in a very far away neighborhood to have this resolution, this peaceful resolution of conflicts. And this is key to build in citizenship and peace processes in the communities, and of course promoting and empowering and economic empowering. And that's something else that we have achieved, is that getting closer to the authorities, because we have to rebuild that dialogue and that relationship, mainly with police officers. We have taken National Guard, state and municipal police to work on these communities. Even the militaries we have been there painting. But it's not just about painting, it is about a community work to meet the other person that we might think it's different from us, and that maybe they're not so different. So this is another project of peace, building peace. Women would feel very insecure here. There had been a lot of thefts and things like that. So it's about building a before and after in Nezahualcóyotl. This is Ciudad Juárez in Villas del Prado. Then we call it Villas at full color. This is in in Torreón, sorry. New Mexico, and we have the afters. This is the same place in Nesa. This is the same place in Naucalpan, transformed already, where we were working with the community, with the police officers, with children at school, for them to put the little grain of sand so that we can have this participation from the citizens. So in the end, these are projects that are not so expensive, because in the end, end up being very emblematic. It has to do with working and building up awareness, but also doing this inclusion of the public space. And something very important also in these projects has been doing it in a very comprehensive way. So when we worked, and we talked about this before, on gender perspective, I hear a lot the money of the public spaces recovery with gender perspective. Sometimes we don't even know what that means, or gender police. No, it's not just police cars that are painted in pink. No, I mean everybody from down to up, they all have to have that perspective. It's not only small groups. It's about approaching from this level to work with children, because that's where we have to plant the seed as well. And also important to work with men. These are the men who are allies. We have new masculinities, and sometimes they mock you when you get there and you say things like this, because they're like, I'm not gay or something. But we are calling this now ally men, so that we can bring them up. And we did this with the hip hop junks, and we were like, we have a topic here, so you have to take a gender equality course so that you can make your songs. So mechanical workshop, then at the end we give you this workshop, but at the end we have to talk about gender equality for 20 minutes. Okay, so it's to find a way on how to do it, and that's not easy. And I would say, just to close up, what's most important is how do we get their trust. What's most difficult is to gain the people's trust, and we can only achieve that working in a serious and real way, and to have that transformation. And this is just a pretext, but the excuse, but the community is the center, and as I said, the people are the main actors of this change. There we have two gangs that were fighting, Gatos y Pechoneros. It was a mediation process through color, through children, and this is in Ciudad Juárez. As you can see, it was an open space full of garbage, and we made some resiliency, and we turned the tires in games for children and things to use. And we went out to paint with children, police officers, and they know this place as Villas at full color. They go there, they take photos, and some artists have even gone there to record their videos. So this is one of the meetings, another example of community meetings. The police officers become artists, and some others that we have here. I want to close up with this one. We work a lot with private sector in Lázaro Cárdenas, because it is the economy that came there and didn't integrate the community, and they have a lot of problems with that. So we had a lot of processes there with them too. Thank you. But there is a common factor, I believe, in the responses that you have just given us, which is the long term. How to manage for those actions in the different organizations, Agenda Migrante, UN Women, and all the others to be long term, and what is the role that the citizens have, because our panel is called Cities That Take Care, Quality of Life and Public Services. And as I was telling the secretary that is here with us, we say public services and we immediately point out to the governments, but what happens with the role of the citizen to maintain those actions, little or small ones, important or not so important sometimes, but that could be cared, so that the caring of these public services could really generate a quality life, and that for that quality life to be sustainable and to generate well-being. How do we manage how do we do for citizens to maintain the services in the long term? Alejandra? Thank you. So I believe that from UN Women, when we were talking about the work and services of care, we were talking about co-responsibility a lot, and also very importantly, when I was talking about the right to care, because the state is the one who guarantees this rights. Of course, the state from the governments, we have to boost this politics, these services, but this co-responsibility indeed has to boost the redistribution of the care work with the market, with the communities, and with people. That is to say, between women and men, so that we could be responsible of these tasks that are so important, that support life, and that because of this reason as belongs to everyone. So, and everyone in every stage of their lives, we need this type of care. So in this regard, just to underscore this and just know that we cannot leave this responsibility only to women. Well, from our part, we are working in a conjunct way together with, I believe that every public policy that hasn't been socialized, that it's not made in a participative way, it's a public policy that is destined to die. From the Ministry of Women, we are working, and indeed on March 8, we signed an agreement with all the business chambers on all public and private universities of the state to do this violet distinction, where we are working with different protocols, different acting and things to eradicate gender violence as part of going back to the actors and to make them participate. Another thing that we're doing is working along with different collective groups and in topics in the Congress and the regulatory framework for those public policies to transcend and to stay. That is why we're working on a legislative agenda in the municipalities and with the governments for it to be an obligation to have a women government entity. We want for it not to be just to the will of the government in turn, but we want for this policy to, with different actors of the civil society and, as my colleagues just said, to come from the society and for them to have that ownership of any public policy, and those are the ones that are destined to last longer. I completely agree with everything you're saying, co-responsibility and public policies. These are part of the instruments, and I believe it's important to mention a statistic that we have in our foundation on terms of participation. We have identified that 4.8% of Mexicans have participated once in a community activity. That means that 95% of Mexicans have never participated in a voluntary way in any activity to improve our community. And in fact, when you see this type of statistics, I believe that co-responsibility effect and the boosting those participative effects, this means making citizenship and for the citizen to become the monitor of those public services that we demand for the city, but also it is a way in which we can reinterpret how do we have to be co-responsible of our own community, right? And I believe so. I believe co-responsibility starts moving forward in this way, and it's a call to action. I believe that this call to action is the way in which we are going to be able to do this co-responsibility exercise. I believe sustainability and long-term are the ones that are going to show if your process is well done. As we were saying, when you have identity, belonging, when the community really takes that project and make it their own, and that's really hard. And something that happens in this citizen inclusion is that unfortunately governments and the way we do government has made for people to say, well, and what am I going to get out of this? And okay, and are you going to do it? And so we have to change this idea. And for me, that is the greatest challenge that I had when we get to the communities. How can I switch this idea that only if I get something in exchange or you are going to come here and do it, this trying to help, how can we help this idea and so that we can do some co-production and in my case, security, surrounding. And it can be done, but it's not easy. In the end, it's breaking the stigmas because we have stigmas from them to us as well, and to really make them see that we are talking seriously and to use examples. The strategy that I always recommend is start with something that you can do, because maybe I can promise a castle, but I don't know when am I going to get it for you. But I can promise you if we get organized and we do this and this, we can get to this result. So something that you can really achieve so people can start, believing. So start by transforming something that is very visible so that people can say, oh, it's possible and I can change my own as well. So it's just thinking on how to include people. Children are key. I mean, whenever children get involved, the parents get involved. So it has happened to me that many of those spaces have graffiti, but not in those places, and that means something. That means that the community is taking care of this. And the person that makes graffiti, that's the first person we look for, and they're helping us there. So this is not having stigmas, and we're not like saying, oh, that's the one that it's a bad boy, that it's just doing bad things. So no, we have to include them as well, because we have to give them opportunities. Give opportunities to those who have had it the hardest. And it's not just about giving them scholarships or things like that. Okay, that's fine, but it's not enough. We have to accompany them. It's a scholarship. It's not going to give you structure if you have never had it. It's not going to give you tools that you have never had. So we have to accompany them and give them other tools, and then you can have that belonging and that participation. Thank you so much. So we're closing up like this, the talk for today, cities that take care of quality of life and public services. I want to thank our speakers today, Alejandra Diveres de las Dere. Your last name is very complicated. UN Women, thank you so much. Secretary of Women, Maria Cristina Castillo, Eduardo Rivera, Hogares Foundation, and Almonice Rondon, Red Viral and Migrant Agenda. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and congratulations.